up, Renegades? Welcome to episode 1 of the Just Winging It podcast with Tattoo Tom. I'm Tom. I'm the director of Still Brave Childhood Cancer Foundation. They call me Tattoo Tom for some reason. I wish they called me Handsome Tom or Rich Tom, but you don't get to pick your nicknames. Still Brave provides non-medical support to children with cancer and their families. We help with things, the day-to-day things, the in-the-trenches type things. We help with rents, utility bills, cell phone bills. We help with car repairs, transportation. We have an all-star sibling program where we put on events that celebrate the brothers and sisters of children with cancer whose lives are almost always overshadowed by their siblings' diagnosis through no fault of their own or anybody else. It just happens. But we want to make sure that we recognize and celebrate them as well so they don't get left out. And sadly, we help to pay for way too many funerals. When my daughter Shayla died from childhood cancer in 2009, I wondered why somebody didn't do something. Then I realized, well, I am somebody. So I started doing some things. I started doing a shit ton of things, as a matter of fact. And this podcast is my next something. I think when COVID hit, for a lot of small business and nonprofits, we were all hit pretty hard because things changed dramatically in the way that we did business and the way that we raised funds and things like that was different. We couldn't gather the way we always had, and it hit a lot of us really hard. And for me particularly, I was unable to go to the hospitals and the chemotherapy clinics and visit with the kids, which is, it's really the heartbeat of what I do and what Still Brave does. So we had to sort of regroup and we had to sort of figure out what we were going to do moving forward so that we could stay relevant, because we need to stay relevant so that we can help children with cancer and their families. And that's what we really are intending to do. And so anyway, here we are. Welcome to the Just Winging It podcast with Tattoo Tom. Before I go any further, though, I want to take just a minute and I want to mention some friends of mine, Lou and Sue Alami. Now, Lou and Sue, he's a realtor and she's a mortgage lender. But beyond that and before that, they're my friends. And they've been my friends for a really long time. They've always been great supporters of Still Brave. And they're true ambassadors of service, of community. They call Sue the godfather of Loudoun County. And they call him that because Sue gets shit done. He started this amazing brotherhood of men in the county. Loudoun County, one of the biggest, richest counties in the country. But Sue breaks it down to a men helping men, iron sharpening iron type brotherhood with the men of this county, this community. And he's called the Godfather for a reason, like I said, and it's because he gets shit done. And his wife, Lucia, is a really good friend of mine. She and I'm not sure where it is exactly that we're from, but we're from the same place, she and I. I joke with her all the time. I'm like, you're my soul sister. And we feel it. It's a friendship that was predicated on something beyond most friendships. But what's interesting about my relationship with Lou and Sue, and I'm going to talk a lot about them in upcoming episodes because they're going to be working with us on some really cool, brand new initiatives. And I want to tell you, I wouldn't be here in this 1940s farmhouse in this rad-ass podcast studio if it weren't for Lou and Sue. See, I was looking for a place to live. I was going to look for another place to rent, and I happened to reach out to Lucia, and I was like, hey, do you know anybody that's got a cheap, affordable place to rent? She's like, well, why don't you try to buy a place? Interest rates are, historically low. And I was like, girl, I'm older than my credit score. There's no chance I'm going to be able to qualify for a loan. And she talked me into it. She talked me into believing in myself, and I filled out the paperwork. And lo and behold, I qualified for a small but respectable loan, and I was able to get the house of my dreams. But that was what was so cool about Lou and Sue. So Lucia secures this pre-qualified loan for me, and she puts me in touch with her husband, the realtor, and all of a sudden, they're trying to make my dreams come true. I never once felt like they were making money off me. I never once felt like he was trying to sell more houses and she was trying to sign more loans. I felt like these were my friends that were helping me to realize my dream of owning a small farmhouse. And so this beautiful 1940s farmhouse that we have here in Linden, Virginia, we're now going to set up as a therapeutic petting farm farm for children with cancer and their families. Again, with COVID, children with cancer have been hit harder than anybody because they're already immunocompromised. On the best days pre-COVID, they couldn't really go out and mix and mingle. Now there's nowhere for them to go. So we'll be able to provide a COVID-friendly place for them. Even after maybe this passes, it'll still be a safe place for them to come in small groups, with their families, to play with our goats. We're getting a miniature pony, a therapy pony that they can play with, and we're gonna have a 30-foot inflatable movie screen out in the front yard so we can show movies in the summer and the spring, and maybe we'll have some homemade goat cheese, and who knows, we can sit on the porch. I got a mighty fine sitting porch. It's bigger than Texas, my sitting porch. We got rockers for days, so I invite you guys to come out and sit for a spell on my mighty fine sitting porch sometime. But anyways, again, a shout out to Lou and Sue Alami. We're going to talk a lot more about them in the future. But tonight I just want to introduce you to them as my friends, because they're my friends. We have, a business association that we're going to, look into moving forward. But right now I want to introduce you to my friends, Lou and Sue. But anyways, so back to why we started this podcast. I think it was Darwin what said, it's not the strongest or the most intelligent of the species that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. And so we here at Still Brave, in light of COVID, decided we needed to adapt. We needed to change. So we dug our heels in and we adjusted our sails, and we decided to really put this winging it business to the test. And so here we are, Just Winging It podcast with Tattoo Tom. You see, I learned that there are basically 4 types of people in this world. There are those who see a burning building and then they kind of run down the street screaming, "Fire, fire," with their arms in the air. "Somebody help, help." But they keep on running down the street, getting as far away from the fire as they can. And then you have a second type of person who looks at the fire and they just keep on moving. And they're like, "Not my fire, not my house, not my problem." Then, though, there's a third type of person, and that third type of person who's the one that runs straight into that building without giving it a second thought, without even a fleeting thought. They run in there because guess what? Maybe, just maybe, there's somebody in there that they can help get out. Maybe there's somebody in there that they can save. And then there's a fourth person. The fourth person is the one that sits on the curb and watches that building burn, watches the flames engulf it, and they sit there and they criticize and they judge and they condemn and they do a whole lot of things to the first 3 people that I mentioned. So I think those of you who know me, you should go without saying which one of those 4 that I am. And so here we are, while others are running in the other direction, screaming with their arms in the air or turning a blind eye or judging or condemning others, I just show up. I show up no matter what, constantly. That's my MO, and that's what I tell people all the time. Like, I show up and then I wing it. Because the truth be told, besides that sort of instinctual act, because quite frankly, you don't get to choose which of those 4 people you are. You get to find out which one of those 4 people you are when you see your very first burning building. So once I found out the type of person that I was, I realized beyond that instinctual act of running into that burning building, I really have no idea what I'm going to do beyond that most of the time. I'm always literally just winging it. Now listen, I want to be perfectly clear from the beginning, though, before we go any further, right now on episode 1. While this podcast will delve deeply into the current state of childhood cancer research and treatment in these United States of America on many of our episodes. However, this podcast will in no way ever resemble one of those agonizing Sarah McLachlan type commercials. We intend to raise hell when appropriate and celebrate the struggles and the victories rather than dwell in the pity parties and the sadness, although we are quite cognizant of those realities. Likewise, though, we don't want you to think for 1 second this is going to be one of those fluffy, feel-good St. Jude's commercial where every smiling bald-headed child with cancer gets offered treatment at their facility. Then they go to Disney World, and then everybody gets a cure and lives happily ever after. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, could be further from the truth. Hopefully in time, you will come to see that you will always get the truth from us here at Just Winging It with Tattoo Tom. The truth, straight up, served to you straight up with no chaser. not some watered down bullshit version of the truth, but the truth. We are renegades, and we plan to act and carry ourselves accordingly. It's important to note, too, that while our podcast and many of our guests that we will be speaking to will be speaking about all things childhood cancer, but we here at Just Winging It will not be limited to, nor will we allow ourselves to be defined by that content. There are also many, many other layers and textures and rabbit holes here on this podcast that you won't find anywhere else, certainly not in one place anyway. This podcast might not be for everybody, but there is something for everybody on this podcast. Aside from my childhood cancer activism, advocacy, and work as director of Still Brave, there are many other layers, stories, and multiple initiatives always taking place in my life and in my brain that make up who and what I am personally. My life is weird. My life is eclectic. But you know what my life is? My life is authentic. And I live an authentic life. So I'm going to invite you into my life. I'm going to invite you into my head once a week on these podcasts. And I'm going to share with you what's going on. And so I encourage you to join us and to buckle your seatbelts. Keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times. And do not, I repeat, do not stand up until this ride comes to a complete stop. Now, as I've traveled down the pathways of my years, I've had a plethora of really diverse jobs, careers, and business ventures, including, I've been a chef, I was a histology lab technician, I've been a taxi driver, a body piercer, I was a skydiving videographer. I've had just about every, construction or vocational trade job that you can imagine. I've dug ditches, I've washed dishes, and I've also owned several really successful businesses, including a well-respected, award-winning tattoo studio and a high-end home improvement company. It seems, too, like there's always been an ever-evolving cast of colorful characters who've come into my life. Hell, once I lived with Fred Durst for a little while down in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. It's a long story, my claim to fame, Fred Durst. And then another time on just a whim one day, I packed a sleeping bag and a few T-shirts into a backpack, and with only $500 in my pocket, I met this girl. All the great stories start out with, I met this girl, don't they? Yeah, so I met this girl, and she drove me to San Francisco, and she left me in the middle of the Mission District. And I watched her drive away. I thought to myself, what am I going to do now? But interestingly enough, I wound up staying, not having known a single soul in California or San Francisco. I wound up staying for well over a year, but I never saw that girl again. Anyways, in addition to that, I'm a half-assed Buddhist on my best days and an angry atheist on others. I've attended and studied at a Buddhist temple for the past 16 years or so, and two of my very good friends are Christian pastors. I named my son Jack after one of them, and I talked the other one into quoting Maynard James Keenan to her congregation during one of her Sunday sermons. I don't know who got a bigger kick out of that, me or Maynard, if he would ever find out. But anyways, the lead singer of Tool was quoted in the Church of the Brethren sermon one day. I've read the Bible cover to cover. I know it more or better than most Christians. I've even read the begat chapters. And I get down with Jesus, the man, and I think he was a rad dude. I totally would have hung out with him, and I thank God he wasn't a Christian, though, because most Christians, they're really nothing like Jesus. And I think that's why my man turned over tables and shit in the temple, but that's a whole nother story for another day. In the past, I've also, I've sometimes still do, I sing in punk rock bands that aren't very good, but we still got gigs opening up for bands like the Dickies, the Dead Kennedys, the Misfits. Again, my life is weird. My life is eclectic, but it's authentic and it's real. I'm living a great story, in spite of some of the really hard things that I've had to deal and endure. Including the death of my daughter, which I could speak a whole episode about what that was like. But in spite of that, I live the most beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful, tragic, heartbreaking, wonderful, scary, amazing life that I never ever would have wanted, and I'm so very grateful that I have. and I want to share that with you guys because like it's weird, and I think you'll find it very entertaining. Once in a while, also, I get some pretty interesting public speaking gigs. I've been asked quite a bit to just speak at different events and fundraisers, not only for childhood cancer-related foundations and initiatives, but also just really out of the blue conventions and things like that. I've shared stages with a few people like Danny Trejo, Eric Cantor, former Speaker of the House, actress Helen Hunt, Judd Apatow, his wife Leslie Mann, and I once had the honor of sharing the TEDx stage with Nikki Giovanni, and I think that was one of the highlights of my life. I'm one of the few people in the world, in fact, who was given the opportunity to deliver 3 TEDx talks. It's unusual for somebody to get 3, and I couldn't tell you with any absolute certainty as to why I was given that opportunity, but all 3 of them were about childhood cancer, and I was very aggressive and unapologetic in those. And I would encourage you to look in the comment section for links to those TEDx talks. You'll get a lot more insight into how aggressive I am when it comes to childhood cancer and the current state of treatment and research in these United States of America. But truth be told, I'd rather share the confines of a hospital room with the families and children with cancer than to be given an opportunity to hang out with any of those aforementioned people. I mean, that's great, and I guess I'm honored, but I'm more honored to be in the hospital with the kids and to be invited into that most sacred place. Quite frankly, and I never would have dreamed in a million years that I would be good at such a thing. It certainly wasn't in my life plan, but my daughter Shayla, before she died, I reckon she had other ideas, and so here we are. In addition to that, I believe in love, I guess, but apparently I'm not very good at it. I was married and divorced twice to the same woman, but recently I met this girl, LOL, so you never know. Anyway, some of the topics and guests we will have on upcoming episodes will include, but are no means limited to, skydivers and skydiving, punk rock, poetry, ultra running, all things DC. And no, I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about the heartbeat, the heart and soul of DC. See, I grew up outside of DC and in that area my whole entire life, and there's a lot more to D.C. than people are aware of. When the politicians all go home at the end of the night and the city comes alive with the natives and the music, the punk, the go-go, the food, the mambo, all the stuff that is D.C. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to show you different parts of D.C. and talk about different parts of D.C. that are beyond what you see on TV with some stuffy politicians, just aggravating each other. We're going to show you the heartbeat of DC. We're going to talk about goat farming because, like I said, I bought this farm and we're going to convert it into a small therapeutic petting farm. And so we're going to have goats and a miniature pony and chickens and maybe some ducks, things like that. We're going to talk about flowers. And you can look at me and tell that more than likely we're going to have a conversation or an episode or two about tattoos. We're going to talk about Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. And that's a whole episode in and of itself. That may be many episodes. We're going to talk about my kids. I've got 5 of them. And in addition to my daughter Shayla, who passed away, I've got 5 other kids. And we're going to talk about my dog Percy. And we'll probably, on some episodes, we'll talk about my 3-legged cats. You never know. I was a chef. We might be talking about cooking. We might have a little cooking episode, show you guys how to whip something up. I can pretty much cook anything you see those fancy chefs make on TV. So maybe one day we'll do a little cooking. You never know what you're going to get here. That's the best part. Some days we even talk about spirituality. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality. There's a difference, And we may talk about human rights a lot because I'm very interested in human rights, and I'm very interested in equality, and I'm very interested in a lot of the things that people sometimes confuse with politics. And I don't want to do that. When we talk about human rights, you're not talking about politics. You're talking about human rights. Now, I realize sometimes those two may overlap, and I'm willing to face those with you guys. We'll walk through that. But by no means am I gonna hold back out of fear of upsetting either the right or the left when it comes to my particular stances on human rights and equality and things like that. I'm very, very aggressive about that, as equally aggressive about that as I am about childhood cancer. But anyway, some of the upcoming initiatives and projects that Still Brave is working on that you're certainly going to hear a lot about is these next things that I'm going to talk to you about are really kind of how things are going to flow for a while and hopefully for a long time. We do things. We're always trying to think outside of the box. And with COVID and what hit with COVID, we've had to think outside of the box. So some of the things we got coming up, just for you local folks, we've got a Still Brave fashion merchandise launch taking place next Saturday, the 27th of March in Chantilly, Virginia at the Uno Brewery Company. And that'll be from 1 to 4. Now, I would encourage you guys to come out, check out our new line of hoodies, T-shirts. We have mugs and lanyards, and we just produced 2 different leggings for you ladies and men if you're so inclined. Hell, you never know. I might even be wearing a pair of those leggings at the launch. In addition to that, Uno Brew Company has been gracious and has sponsored us through one of their beers called Hell Yes Lager. For the first quarter of their business, they've been giving us 15% of every one of the Hell Yes Lagers that they sell. And so come out and get yourself a case of the beer. I don't even drink beer, but I got a case in my refrigerator so all of my guests can have it when they come over. Apparently, it's a really good beer. People really, really like it. So come out, meet me, hang out. Get a chance to get some merchandise, some Still Brave swag before it becomes available to the general public. And hell, you never know, you might get a chance to see me in some leggings. Should be entertaining, if nothing else. There will be a link in the comments. In addition to that, and allow me to get serious for a second, I am an unapologetic, aggressive activist for children with cancer and their families. I'm not going to candy coat anything. I'm not Willy Wonka. I don't candy coat shit. And so the reality of the situation is the National Cancer Institute only earmarks 4% of all the billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, that are appropriated annually for cancer research in this country. It's funneled through the National Cancer Institute. And they only give 4%, that's 4 cents of every dollar, to study and research childhood cancers. Now, maybe that wouldn't be a problem if that 4% amounted to anything, but it amounts to nothing. It has never amounted to anything in the entire decade plus that I've been sort of aware and cognizant of childhood cancer. When my daughter Shayla died in 2009, she was being treated with the same chemotherapies that they were using 20 years before she got diagnosed. And the irony is that if your child gets diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma today, she or he is going to be treated with the same exact chemotherapies that my daughter was treated with, which were at 20 years old when she got them. And don't let anybody kid you. Chemotherapy is not medicine. We euphemistically call it medicine, but it's poison. It's not medicine. It was originally derived from mustard gas, a chemical warfare agent deemed so inhumane that we don't even use it on our enemies in times of war. But it's the go-to medicines for children with cancer? Yeah, I have a problem with that. So we're going to have a rally at the National Cancer Institute. We're going to go down there on March 30th, and we're going to meet in front of that place at the metro stop at noon, and we're going to have signs, and we're going to stay there, and we're going to scream and chant, and I'm going to have a bullhorn, and we're going to stand there until somebody can come out and tell me why my child and your child is only worth 4%. Because you know what? I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of going to the funerals of children, and I'm sick of the National Cancer Institute's status quo on the matter. Your status quo has got to go. So I'm going to be down there, and I would encourage you guys to join me, please, in Bethesda, Maryland, at the National Cancer Institute, which is an offshoot of the National Institutes of Health, in Bethesda, Maryland, at 12 noon. Bring your signs, make it happen. In addition to that, just real quick, we've got a tattoo auction and a lottery currently in place. Again, you'll find links in the comment for that event I just mentioned, the Renegade Rally. You'll also find links in the comment section for our tattoo auction and our lottery auction, both for tattoos. You'll get matching tattoos with Tattoo Tom. If you'd like more information about that, please go to the links in the comments. In addition to that, we're going to be running a 240-mile ultra marathon this October called the Moab 240. It's 240 miles through the Moab Desert in Utah. And we're dedicating each of those 240 miles to a different child who's either fighting cancer or has lost their battle to cancer. We're going to carry pictures of each and every one of those children with us, and we're going to recognize and say their names at each and every mile. I'm going to be going with Lauren Jewell who's a childhood cancer survivor. She's also a firefighter here in the local area. She's going to be my guest the next week on the next podcast, so I'm not going to tell you too much about her because we're going to make a whole episode out with her next week. But we'll encourage you to come out. I'm an ultra marathon runner. I've completed two 200-mile ultra marathons, one of them about Mount St. Helens volcano. And we intend to run and we intend to finish the Moab 240 this October. You can look in the comments section and find a link how you can sponsor one of those miles or make a donation to one or more of those miles. And I'm going to be talking about that a great deal as we move forward and as training progresses. And another thing that I want to talk about is a book that I'm writing. I really haven't talked much about it on my Facebook or any of my other social medias. People know that I'm writing a book, but since we got the podcast, on right now, let me tell you a little bit about my book. It's a book called Inside Out, If These Tattoos Could Talk. And basically, it's a semi-autobiographical story of me, a tattooed knucklehead. But what you might find out is there's a lot more to me than my tattoos. But there's a lot more to my tattoos than you might also think. So anyway, check it out. It's going to be coming out. We're not exactly sure when, but I'm working with a photographer named Tamara. We're getting photographs of the tattoos. I'm writing the chapters. I even have a for real editor named Doc. Shout out to Doc. I'll be getting some chapters to you real soon, I promise. Let me tell you a quick story if I could. So there's this girl named Meg, and she talked me into getting a tattoo one time. And it's kind of a long story, but I'll give you the short, condensed version of it. I went to visit her at the hospital, and she says, Tom, when are you going to get a tattoo from me? And I was like, Meg, I can't just get a tattoo for everybody, because I auction off a part of my body every year to the highest bidder, and I can't just get a tattoo for everybody. I'd run out of room. But Meg was like, you got, I hear what you're saying, but when are you going to get a tattoo for me? And I said, Meg, listen, here's the deal. I'll get a tattoo for you, but you've got to come up with a really good idea. It can't be just some regular old, run-of-the-mill tattoo. It's got to be the tattoo of tattoos. So we wound up walking around doing some laps at the hospital, and that's what happens sometimes when you get bored after days and days at the clinic. You wind up just walking laps, and they have little markers to tell you how many miles there were. Anyway, Meg says to me, she hadn't been talking. All of a sudden, she looks at me. She goes, "I got the idea." And I was like, "Oh, you did, huh? What is it?" She goes, "You know how you're always here at the chemotherapy clinics and the hospitals, and you're walking around with us kids, and we're dragging our IV poles?" I was like, "Yeah, Meg. No." And she says, "Well, you should get a tattoo of an IV pole so we don't feel so all alone." I was like, damn. And I called the tattoo studio and I made an appointment. I have that tattoo on my leg, and it wound up being my favorite tattoo because now when I go in to meet children with cancer, and especially the younger kids, I'm like, and they're hooked up to their IVs, I'm like, whoa, you got an IV pole? So do I, man. So do I. And I show them my tattoo, and all of a sudden we're friends and we got something in common. So, look, I got a lot more stories. I got stories for days. But anyways, I think that's enough. Let's call it a day. That's episode 1 in the can. As you hopefully gathered, we will have a lot more ridiculous, rad, and interesting content for you in the coming weeks. Truth be told, though, if it were up to me, I'd rather be spending all my time in the hospitals, the chemotherapy clinics, and the hospice facilities playing Barbies and cars and Crazy 8s with the children whom I serve. And sadly, sometimes holding their hands as they die. I believe my work with them to be sacred work, and I treat it as such. But it's not up to me. So I reckon I'll be here just winging it once a week from now on. Please, if you like what you heard today and you're excited about what we're going to have coming, hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on. This podcast might not be for everybody, but I promise you there will be something for everybody on this podcast. Thanks, you guys, for joining me this week on Just Winging It with Tattoo Tom. Still brave, Shayla. Still brave. Still brave, Shayla. Still brave.